Have you ever wondered why the same people keep hurting you? Why, despite all your boundaries, all your growth, all your promises to yourself, you still end up wounded by words that shouldn't matter, by rejections that feel like they're killing you, by betrayals you never saw coming? What if I told you that today is the last day anyone will ever truly hurt you again? Not because you'll become cold or closed off, not because you'll perfect your walls or master manipulation, but because of something far more powerful that Carl Jung discovered nearly a century ago, a psychological truth so transformative that most people go their entire lives without realizing it exists. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to share the exact psychological mechanism that allows others to wound you so deeply, in the precise way to dismantle it forever. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't just let it go. This is the actual neural rewiring that freedom requires. Stay with me for just the first 5 minutes, and you'll understand why the person who hurt you most recently wasn't actually the source of your pain. Stay for the full video, and you'll walk away with the most powerful emotional protection you've ever encountered. One that doesn't require cutting people off or hardening your heart. I know what it's like to feel so wounded that breathing hurts, to wonder if you'll ever feel safe in relationships again. I've been exactly where you might be right now. That's why what I'm about to share isn't theoretical. It's the actual path that transformed my life and the lives of thousands I've worked with. Let's begin with the truth about your wounds that no one has ever told you. Close your eyes for a moment and remember the last time someone's words pierced straight through your defenses. That colleague who casually questioned your competence in front of everyone. The lover who said they needed space and somehow collapsed your entire sense of worth. The parent whose disappointment still echoes in your ears decades later. These moments don't just hurt, they devastate. And here's what Jung discovered. The devastation isn't proportional to what actually happened. The devastation comes from what psychologists call wound activation. When someone's actions or words touch the exact unhealed trauma you've been carrying, often since childhood. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung wrote, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These wounds aren't just memories. They're active psychological forces operating 24/7 beneath your awareness. They don't just influence your reactions, they dictate them. They don't suggest caution. They scream danger and hijack your entire nervous system. But Jung offered us something revolutionary, a path to genuine freedom from this pain. At the core of Jung's teachings is the concept of the shadow, those parts of ourselves we've disowned, repressed, or never developed. The shadow contains not just our darker impulses, but also our unprocessed pain, our unmet needs, and often our greatest potential. When someone hurts us, the pain doesn't just come from their actions. It comes from how their actions interact with our shadows, with our unhealed wounds and unacknowledged vulnerabilities. Think of it this way. Imagine you have a wound on your arm that hasn't fully healed. A gentle touch that would feel pleasant on healthy skin might cause you to recoil in pain if it lands on that tender spot. The touch itself isn't inherently painful. It becomes painful because of the wound it encounters. Our emotional reactions work similarly. When someone's words or actions touch an unhealed part of our psyche, the pain we feel is often disproportionate to the actual event. It's our wound being activated, not just a response to the present moment. Jung would tell us that this is precisely where our power lies. Because if our wounds amplify our pain, then healing our wounds can fundamentally change how we experience the world and the people in it. The projection of our pain. One of Jung's most profound insights was his understanding of projection. He said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When we are deeply hurt by someone, particularly in patterns that repeat throughout our lives, we're often encountering projections of our own unhealed aspects. This doesn't mean the other person didn't act wrongly or that we deserve mistreatment. Rather, it means that what wounds us most deeply often connects to wounds we already carry. Think about the person whose casual comment about your work sent you into a spiral of self-doubt, or the partner whose emotional distance reopened all your abandonment wounds, or the friend whose success stirred up feelings of inadequacy you thought you'd overcome. In each case, the external trigger meets an internal vulnerability, and Jung would tell us, this is where our liberation begins. Because when we understand that our deepest pain comes from the meeting of external events with internal wounds, we realize we have more power than we ever imagined. We cannot always control others or circumstances, but we can heal the wounded parts within that amplify our suffering. The path of individuation. Jung called the journey toward wholeness individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious aspects of ourselves into consciousness, becoming more fully who we are meant to be. This path requires immense courage. We must turn toward our pain rather than away from it. We must be willing to feel what we've spent years numbing or avoiding. We must excavate buried memories, examine painful patterns, and confront the ways we've limited ourselves to avoid further hurt. But this work, this brave, beautiful work, changes everything. When you integrate your shadow, when you bring compassionate awareness to your wounded parts, something miraculous happens. The power others have to hurt you diminishes dramatically. Not because you've built higher walls, but because you've healed the vulnerable places those walls were meant to protect. Before I continue with the next transformative step, I want to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for subscribing to this channel. Your decision to click that subscribe button isn't just a digital action, it's a commitment to your healing journey and a vote of confidence in this work we're doing together. Each subscription genuinely fuels my dedication to bringing you these life-changing insights. Thank you so much. It truly means the world to me. The alchemy of shadow work. Jung was fascinated by alchemy, not just as the medieval pursuit of turning lead into gold, but as a metaphor for psychological transformation. The alchemical process mirrors our inner work, taking what appears worthless or painful and transforming it into wisdom and strength. Shadow work is our personal alchemy. It's the courageous act of examining our pain points, our triggers, our patterns of reaction, and our deepest fears. It asks us to hold these wounded parts with compassion rather than judgment. Let me offer you a practice. Close your eyes if it's safe to do so while listening. Bring to mind a recent interaction that caused you pain. Perhaps someone's words hurt you, or their actions made you feel rejected or misunderstood. Now, instead of focusing on what they did wrong, turn your attention inward. What exactly did this trigger in you? What old story or wound did it touch? What did this interaction make you believe about yourself, about relationships, about life? This is shadow work in action. It doesn't excuse others' behavior, but it puts the power of healing back in your hands. Because when you understand the deeper layers of your pain, you can bring awareness and compassion to places that have been operating in darkness. The boundary of self-knowledge. As we do this work, we develop what Jung might consider the ultimate boundary, not a wall that keeps others out, but a deep knowledge of self that allows us to distinguish between what belongs to us and what doesn't. True boundaries aren't built from fear or defensiveness. They emerge naturally from self-understanding. When you know yourself, your values, your needs, your triggers, and your wounds, you can interact with others from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. You begin to recognize when someone's behavior is triggering an old wound rather than creating a new one. You can pause before reacting, creating space to respond with intentionality rather than from pain. You can discern when to engage and when to step away, not from fear, but from wisdom. This is how nothing and nobody can truly hurt you again. Not because you never experienced discomfort or disappointment, but because you no longer interpret these experiences through the lens of your unhealed wounds. You no longer give away your power to external circumstances or other people's actions. The mirror of relationships. Our relationships become the mirrors in which we see our inner work reflected. Jung understood that our closest connections often activate our deepest wounds and offer our greatest opportunities for healing. Consider how patterns repeat in your life. Perhaps you've had several partners who became emotionally unavailable, or friends who betrayed your trust in similar ways, or colleagues who undervalued your contributions. Jung would invite us to look beyond the surface similarities to the deeper pattern. What wound in you is being touched? What unmet need is being highlighted? What aspect of yourself are you projecting onto these relationships? This isn't about blaming yourself for others' actions. It's about recognizing that healing your wounds changes what you attract, what you tolerate, and most importantly, how deeply external circumstances can impact your inner peace. When you heal the wounded part that believes you're unworthy of consistent love, you naturally stop accepting crumbs of affection as though they're feasts. When you heal the part that fears abandonment, you no longer interpret normal distance as rejection. When you heal the part that bases your worth on others' approval, their criticism loses its devastating power. The inner marriage. Jung spoke often about the inner marriage, the integration of our masculine and feminine energies, our conscious and unconscious minds, our light and shadow aspects. This inner union creates a wholeness that cannot be shattered by external forces. When we depend on others to complete us, to make us feel worthy, safe, or loved, we remain vulnerable to profound hurt. But when we cultivate wholeness within, we relate to others from fullness rather than lack. We love because we choose to love, not because we need something the other person holds. This inner marriage doesn't happen overnight. It's the work of a lifetime, this gentle bringing together of all we are. But with each step toward integration, our emotional resilience grows stronger. We become less like fragile glass, easily shattered by others' actions, and more like water, responding to obstacles by flowing around them, maintaining our essential nature regardless of what stands in our path. The symbols of transformation. Jung recognized the power of symbols to communicate what rational language cannot. Our dreams, our art, the images that captivate us. These often carry messages from our unconscious, guiding our healing journey. Pay attention to the symbols that appear in your life, the recurring dream, the image you're drawn to without knowing why, the story that moves you to tears. These aren't random. They're the language your psyche uses to communicate what your conscious mind hasn't yet grasped. One powerful universal symbol is that of the wounded healer, the understanding that our deepest wounds, once transformed, become our greatest gifts to the world. Your pain, when processed and integrated, becomes your medicine, not just for yourself, but for others walking similar paths. This alchemical transformation, from wound to wisdom, from pain to purpose, may be the most beautiful aspect of Jung's psychology. Nothing is wasted. No suffering is meaningless when it becomes the compost from which your deeper compassion, wisdom, and strength emerge. The spiritual dimension. While Jung was a psychiatrist and scientist, he recognized that true healing encompasses the spiritual dimension of our existence. He understood that many of our deepest wounds touch our sense of meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than ourselves. He wrote, "Among all my patients in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life." By religious, Jung didn't necessarily mean formal religion, but rather a relationship with the numinous, with mystery, meaning, and the deeper currents of existence. This spiritual connection becomes another source of profound protection from being deeply hurt by others. When your sense of value and purpose is anchored in something transcendent, the opinions and actions of others lose their absolute power over your well-being. You remain responsive, but not devastated. Present, but not captive to others' perceptions. The community of the wounded and healing. As we walk this path of healing, we discover something beautiful. We are not alone. All around us are fellow travelers, carrying their own wounds, doing their own inner work, seeking their own wholeness. Jung understood the profound importance of community in the healing journey, not to fix each other or to hide our wounds behind masks of perfection, but to create spaces where our authentic humanity, with all its scars and beauty, can be witnessed and held. This is the deeper meaning of connection, not dependency, not using others to fill our voids, but the sacred recognition of our shared journey toward wholeness. In this recognition, we find both comfort and courage. When we gather in this spirit of authentic healing, we create containers strong enough to hold our pain without being destroyed by it. We offer each other not just sympathy, but the more profound gift of witnessing without rescuing, holding space for each person's inner wisdom to emerge. The freedom of responsibility. One of the most liberating aspects of Jung's psychology is what we might call responsibility, the ability to choose our response rather than react from our wounds. When we've done our inner work, we gain a precious space between stimulus and response. Someone's criticism, rejection, or abandonment no longer automatically triggers our old patterns of shame, collapse, or rage. Instead, we can pause, breathe, and choose how we wish to respond from our integrated self. This doesn't mean we become emotionless or that we never feel hurt. Rather, it means the hurt no longer defines us or determines our actions. We can feel the sting of disappointment without spiraling into despair. We can acknowledge anger without being consumed by it. We can set boundaries without building walls. This responsibility is perhaps the ultimate freedom, the capacity to remain the author of your own experience regardless of external circumstances. It is the lived reality of nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again, not as an avoidance of pain, but as a profound shift in how pain moves through you. The ongoing journey. This work of integration and healing isn't a destination we reach once and for all. It's a spiral path we walk throughout our lives, returning to similar themes at deeper levels as we continue to grow. Jung understood that the psyche is always seeking balance and wholeness. Our wounds call for healing not just once, but in layers. As we resolve one level of hurt, we often uncover deeper patterns waiting to be transformed. This isn't cause for discouragement, but for gentle perseverance. Each layer of healing brings greater freedom, more authentic connection, and deeper access to your gifts. The spiral nature of growth means you're not going in circles. You're covering similar terrain from higher ground, with greater wisdom and compassion each time. The promise of wholeness. As we move toward conclusion, I want to return to our beginning. The promise that nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again isn't about becoming invulnerable in the sense of feeling nothing. It's about becoming whole in the sense of no longer being defined by your wounds. Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." This is the essence of our exploration today. Your past pain, your wounds, the ways others have hurt you. These experiences are part of your story, but they need not determine your future. Through the courageous work of making the unconscious conscious, of integrating your shadow, of healing your deepest wounds, you reclaim your power to choose who you become. You remain tender, perhaps even more tender than before, but no longer fragile. You remain open to connection, but no longer desperate for validation. You remain responsive to life's inevitable disappointments and losses, but no longer devastated by them. This is the paradoxical strength that emerges from true healing. Not the brittle strength of armor, but the resilient strength of wholeness. Not the illusory protection of numbness, but the genuine safety of integration. Closing thoughts. Beloved listener, wherever you are on this journey of healing, know this. Your wounds are not your weakness, they are doorways to your deepest strength. Your pain is not your enemy, it is the messenger pointing toward what needs your loving attention. Your past is not your destiny, it is the compost from which your more authentic self can grow. The path Jung illuminated is not an easy one. It requires courage to face what hurts. It demands honesty to see your patterns clearly. It takes patience to heal in layers rather than all at once. But this path leads to a freedom that cannot be taken from you because it wasn't given to you by anyone else. It is the freedom that emerges from within as you gather the fragments of yourself and lovingly bring them home. May you walk this path with gentle determination. May you find companions who understand the sacred nature of this journey. May you discover that on the other side of your deepest wounds lies your most authentic power. And may you one day realize that the promise has been fulfilled. Not because the world has become kinder or people have become perfect, but because you have become whole. Nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again in the old devastating ways because you have healed the places where that kind of hurt could take root. Go gently, brave heart. Your healing matters more than you know. Until next time, I remain here, walking this path alongside you.